So, Steve, I have a request. This is something that really rubs me the wrong way. I want the internal communications community to stop asking for the seat at the freaking table.
Oh, hey, preach, brother, preach.
Yeah, you know what they sound like? They sound like the older kids at Thanksgiving. The 13-year-old who says, "Why do I have to sit at the kids' table? I want to sit at the grown-up table." You know what? There is no table. There's never been a table. There's no one in the C-suite sitting around this polished mahogany slab thinking, you know what would really make this strategic discussion complete? Having the person who runs the intranet here. The table has become a metaphor for a participation trophy, and chasing it has made us sound needier than an MBA candidate at a networking happy hour. What we should be asking for isn't proximity to power, it's consequence. It's doing work that's so useful that the leaders come find you because they can't make the decision without getting your input first. That's more important than a seat in a chair that, let's face it, isn't all that comfortable and that can be taken away as quickly as it was given to you.
This table, they treat it like it's the night of the round tables in Camelot, King Arthur. There's no table. It's musical chairs up there. Everyone's yanking chairs out for everybody. It just bothers me so much, Shel. And you're right. It makes us sound pathetic. Whiny little needy people, like we sit here in the basement and we write our newsletters. And why can't we get up there and sit at the big table? We don't need a table. We don't need a seat. You know what we need? We need influence. We need access. And we need respect. And you know how you get those? You earn it. And you don't earn it by not speaking up to power, speaking truth to power. You don't earn it by doing a good newsletter even. You don't do it by having great tactics. You do it by speaking truth to power, by letting leadership know that you can provide counsel, that, you know what, you can tell them your baby's ugly. You know what? Your blog is too stiff. It's too formal. Your messages aren't landing. Why are you doing a 9-minute video when nobody's watching a 9-minute video? That's how you get respect and access and influence. You don't do it by whining for it or mooching around for it. So, yeah, let's be done with the table.
Welcome to On the Same Page, the podcast that helps organizations communicate with their employees, with your hosts, Shel Holtz and Steve Tresenzo.
So, Steve, today we're going to look at how communicators can become consequential and influential. This fits neatly in the consultation segment of the outer ring of the On the Same Page framework. The items in the outer ring are the things that we do every day, all the time. And providing counsel is one of those things. We can provide counsel to departments, to teams, to business units. I have great examples of all of these things. But today, let's hone in on providing counsel to the company's leadership, the C-suite.
Yeah, well, Shel, that's how you get a seat at the table. Just kidding. But it is how you can get influence and access and all the stuff we're talking about. Be a counselor, which means hard work, Shel. Everyone thinks it's easy, but it means telling people hard truths sometimes. It means being a reality check for leaders, which they don't always like. They don't always like being told stuff, but that's what we have to be if we want to have that respect.
Yeah, I mean, helping CEOs and leaders build trust should be at the top of the list that we're counseling them about. Here's a data point. The 2026 Edelman Trust Barometer found 70% of respondents saying that CEOs are obligated to help bridge trust divides, but only 44% actually do it well. That's a 29% leadership credibility gap. And according to a leadership presence report from Ketchum, executives are 2.5 times more likely than frontline employees to trust their CEO to tell the truth about what's happening within their organizations. So, Steve, how do you counsel a CEO who wants to build trust? And how do you counsel a CEO who doesn't think he needs to?
Yeah, Shel, it's a great topic, and I'm glad we're talking about it. I think one of the biggest mistakes communicators and leadership makes is assuming trust is a communications problem. Most trust problems are behavior problems, right? There's very few CEOs that are, or any kind of leader, who is acting with being as transparent as possible, acting ethically, treating employees the right way, telling them the truth, all the time. And when he can't say something or she can't say something, explaining why, and doing all the right things and they don't have a trust problem because they send the wrong email or because their blog isn't that interesting. Trust, if they don't have trust, it usually comes down to missteps or something that's happened. So I would say to leaders, I would say to communicators, where's the trust issue coming from? I mean, if you have the CEO or the leadership, if they're building a culture and they're paying attention to their values and they're doing everything they should be doing, trust will flow naturally. If they're not, it doesn't matter how much you communicate. You're just yelling into a well. So I would look back at behaviors and say, and maybe do some focus groups with employees. Maybe do a survey. I don't think a survey. I think focus groups would be much more effective. And find out, where is this lack of trust coming from? It usually doesn't come down to communication issues. It comes down to missteps. It comes down to things they've done in the past. It comes down to, you put out these values in this mission statement and this everything, and it doesn't align with what you're doing. And you're not walking the talk, to use a bad cliche. It's like I just don't think you can communicate your way out of a credibility problem.
Yeah, I think one of those data points that really provides some insight into where trust might come from is the fact that executives trust the leaders in the C-suite more than the front line does. And if you think about the executives in a company, they have more visibility with
Right.
those executives. They're meeting with them all the time. They're seeing them in the C-suite, which is a physical place where the leadership sits. There are a lot of leaders who don't get out and meet face-to-face with employees very often. I remember this was years and years ago, maybe 35, 40 years ago. It was a Reagan conference at the Fairmont in Chicago, where they all used to be.
Those were kind.
And they had, I think it was the CEO of Avon, the cosmetic company, was one of the keynote speakers. And
I remember this.
You remember him? Yeah, he said that he used to get out to the factory floor at least once a month to remind himself that these folks were all grown-ups. He would chat with them, and somebody operating a fill machine was also the scoutmaster of a Boy Scout troop, or ran a side business with his spouse, or was the treasurer for the local Elks organization, or whatever it might be. These are smart people, and you didn't need to treat them like children, which was a habit executives got into. But he didn't mention this, but at the same time, they were seeing him come out there and talk to them. You're bound to trust somebody that you see more often than somebody who's just up there, in the C-suite, maybe doing a quarterly video or something like that. And that visibility is really important.
Yeah, I think a tale of two leaders. I can do that. We
Sure.
worked about 20 years ago for a huge defense company, maybe the biggest, the largest, for one of their divisions. And I interviewed all their executives for the audit, and they were all on the 7th floor in what the employees called Rug Row. And they never left the 7th floor. Their food was up there. They never left. And employees hated them, and no trust, never saw them. Saw maybe at a town hall once a quarter, once a year. I forgot what it was. And morale, we did focus groups, was in the toilet, no trust, bad culture, all that stuff. The other tale is Schreiber Foods up in Wisconsin. It's the biggest company nobody's ever heard of. They're a dairy company. They make all the cheese for McDonald's, Burger King. They are global. They've got manufacturing plants everywhere. The CEO there was such a fantastic guy. He was on the same floor that we were meeting with the communicators. And every time I walked out to go to the bathroom, he was never at his desk or in his office. He was sitting at somebody else's desk talking to them. He knew everybody. And he was always, and he said to me when I interviewed him, I try not to answer any work emails till I get home at 7 o'clock. My time here in the office should be spent talking to my people. I mean, I've got to be in meetings. I've got to do strategic work. I've got to do all that. But communication wasn't an effort for him. It wasn't a check the list thing. It was just a constant part of his job. To him, it was like saying the CEO goes, I'm not going to worry about finances. That's what he said to me. The CEO not worrying about communication is like the CEO saying, I'm not going to worry about finances or political, whatever the big things they think about are. And it made a huge difference. End of the story, Shel. We took an Uber to the airport. The Uber driver was a former Schreiber. He was retired. He talked about the CEO and how much he liked him. We get into this little airport in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and we go up to the bar, of course, because that's what we do. And the bartender is this 60-year-old woman who's a Schreiber retiree. And we say who we're working with. She goes, "Oh, Mike." This guy's name was Mike. Mike's my buddy. How's my buddy doing? Mike's my buddy. Guess every time Mike, first of all, she worked at Schreiber. Secondly, every time he walked through the airport, he made a point of going to the airport bar to say hi to her. I mean, I don't know if that's inbred, if you have that skill or not, but even if you don't, if you're an introvert, if you're not that kind of guy, you've got to find the middle ground somewhere. You've got to be out there meeting with your employees, talking to them a little bit at least.
Yeah, there are definitely introvert CEOs out there. I've met a CEO who said his worst nightmare is having to work a room, but you got to work a room, and if you just can't, I mean, if that just terrifies you, then your number two should be somebody who can do that in your place. I remember I did some work, this has to be 20 years ago, for the International Monetary Fund. So nobody who was in leadership at that time is still there. The directors are all appointed, and they never came down and met with employees. And the employees really resented this, and they had a very cynical view of the leadership, except one who ate in the lunchroom with everyone else. If I was talking to a group at lunch and they were explaining this to me and they said, except him. And they pointed at the guy with his tray. He was at the cashier and he was chatting with the cashier. And they said, not only is he chatting with her, but he knows her by name.
For
and
sure.
He'll come here and he'll just sit down with a random group of people who work here and chat with them. Everyone in this organization would follow him into battle. The rest of them, no, forget it.
I think that, leaders think that most leaders think communication is something they do. Employees think communications is something leaders are. That's what they say. They see real people. They don't say, oh my God, he's a great communicator. What a great communicator. They see him, what a great guy, what a great woman. They see, and I'm seeing the same thing with our work with PG&E. Patty Poppy's the CEO there.
Yeah.
Same way, just accessible, transparent as all get out, honest, and people would run through fire for her. And I don't think you have to be Johnny Carson. I don't think you have to be a huge extrovert. Be yourself, whoever that is, and make an effort to get out a little bit.
Yeah, find your strength and leverage it. I mean, PwC's Trust in U.S. Business Survey found 53% of business executives say they trust the senior leadership team to a great extent. Only 38% of entry-level staff say the same. Entry-level staff doesn't know the leadership.
Right.
I'll tell you a great story. This was at Mattel. So this was somewhere between 1985, 1986, when I was doing communication there. And the CEO at the time led sort of a town hall. It was in the cafeteria. The cafeteria wasn't big enough to accommodate everyone at headquarters. So it was manager and above that came to this meeting. Everyone else was excluded. And I kept pushing. I said, we need to get everybody in. I know it's not big enough, so let's just do two of them and invite half the people to one and half to the other. And finally, they decided to do this. But he said, we're not just going to make it half and half. We're going to have managers and above to one and everybody below at the other. So, we have the one with everybody below. And the CEO gets up and he makes his remarks and they do the presentations. And afterwards, a group of admins comes up to him. And he says, so what did you all think? And they said, oh, this was wonderful. It was great hearing what's going on. It explains so much of the work that we're doing that we didn't understand. We just have one question. Who are you? He didn't introduce himself. He just assumed that everybody knew who he was. He was the CEO, but they had no clue at that level. So
that is great. What I would tell executives is a lot of them say they have no time for visibility. They have no time to be out there. Visibility doesn't mean being everywhere. It just means being somewhere consistently. It means, employees don't expect, what is the word? Omnipresence. They don't expect, what they do expect is evidence that this guy's around, this woman's around, and that they cares about us, that he's not sitting up in a suite somewhere making decisions that are so unrelated to what we do down here. We're doing all the work. They just want evidence of that. They don't expect them to be at all places at all time, and they don't expect them to be Mike from Green Bay going through there and asking about people's vacations. They don't expect that. The fact that guy did it was fantastic.
Yeah, John Chambers, who used to be the CEO at Cisco, he did a couple of things. First of all, they wanted him to do a CEO blog on the intranet. He was dyslexic and writing was torture. for him. You may remember that Cisco acquired the flip cam. It was that little camera that had the USB that flipped out of it.
Oh,
So
I remember he used that little flip cam. Yeah.
yeah, you used to shoot your video and then just plug the camera right
Right.
in. So because they acquired that company, he would take that flip cam and do selfie videos before the word selfie was even out there. Anything that popped into his mind, it was unscripted, it was top of his head, and he would put that on his blog, and people loved it. It was like he was looking them in the eye,
Yeah.
and talking about what was on his mind, what he was hoping they would do, what he was looking for feedback on. The other thing he did was everybody having a birthday that month would get together. I can't remember if it was breakfast or lunch with him. And he would just wander around and just chat with everybody. You couldn't do this worldwide, but still the stories got around about him doing
That's
this.
funny.
So,
Shel, the more things change, the more they stay the same. We're counseling all of our executives right now to do selfies with an iPhone, just like this. 30 seconds, check in, want to make sure. And I counsel, say, just have one point, say one thing. It's 45 seconds, it's a minute. Stick to one thing. Do it once a week, once a month, twice a week, whatever you're comfortable with. But we don't need a film crew. We don't need a script. We don't need a teleprompter. We don't need lighting. We don't need, any of that. We need that. We need a little bit of effort.
yeah, I think the authenticity of doing that is a
Without a
big deal. And, the 45 second, the 60 second, we know the younger audience is going to look at that. On my other podcast, For Immediate Release, we talked about the clipping economy and the fact that all of these clips that people are doing is what people are watching, not the full length video. So I started doing clips of this podcast. So
Perfect.
you want to reach that younger audience, do those 45 second videos.
Yeah, my son Zach, the third partner of Crescenzo Communications, just did a half an hour presentation on our masterclass about the younger generation, and all that data is there. It's locked in, and that's they're a TikTok generation. They do reels. They do what'd you call it? Clips. 30 seconds, 45 seconds.
Yeah, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, and TikToks. Yeah.
And that takes some coaching, though, Shel. If we're being honest, that's way out of people's comfort zones. They're used to a script. They're used to perfect lighting, perfect draft round. You know what? You can get all that. And if there's no evidence that an actual human being was involved, they would rather hear the guy and stutter and no, I don't know about that. Let me get back. They want a human being, and that's becoming more and more important than any kind of polish or corporateness or formality or slickness, whatever.
Yeah. Now, if you talk to executives, they'll tell you that the number one thing they want from internal communications, the reason they fund internal communications, is alignment. They're looking for alignment between employees and executives, between the employee population and the company's business plan, its strategic plan, its goals, its values. Yet Axios did an annual report and found only 27% of leaders think their staff are entirely aligned with the business goals. And worse, only 9% of employees agree that they're aligned. 80% of leaders think their internal communications are helpful, relevant, and have the context teams need to do their jobs. Only 53% of employees agree. And that's because executives are saying, here's what you need to tell employees. And nobody's asking employees, what do we need to know? What do we need to hear? What do we need to be exposed to in order to be aligned with what the organization's doing?
Well, first of all, I got to ask you, Shel, when, is the buzzword hunter, when did alignment become the dominant buzzword of corporate communications and leadership communications? I mean,
I can't pick a timeline for that, but I know that Zora Artis and Wayne Asplund out of Australia have done a ton of research on this. There's a body of research from them that's pretty good.
Is it really? I'll have to take a look at that. I just taught a workshop out on the East Coast, a live workshop, a writing workshop, and when I do my writing workshops, I get all their data, all their information, newsletters, executive comms, and I thought I was at a chiropractor's convention. Everything was about alignment, getting aligned. At some point, when you beat a word to death like that, it loses all power, and it starts to just mean everything. It does alignment. Let me ask you, Shel. You're the smartest guy I know. Does alignment mean agreement? Is that the same thing?
I think it means that we're in sync. That we're working toward the goals that you guys have established.
So you could say I can understand exactly where we're going. I may not agree with it, but I understand it, and I'll help make it happen. It's not.
Yeah.
I think it's that difference between you're not going to get everybody in agreement, but you can get them aligned on the direction of the business. But I think there's a misunderstanding between alignment and agreement, and I think that's something that we need to
And
discuss.
I think that's important. Yeah. I mean, I've always said that it's not our job to make employees happy. I'll tell you a great CEO counsel story. This is another experience that I had. I won't name the company because this guy's still kicking around, and I don't want to hear from him.
All right. Well, you can tell me after the podcast.
Yeah, I will tell you when we're done recording.
Okay.
But he was the president of the company, and the company was laying off 10% of its headquarters staff. And if you look at layoffs today, I mean, they're done pretty horribly by and large, but they're not sprung on employees. Yeah, it's not. They wake up, they go to work, and suddenly there's a layoff. The companies are signaling this week in advance, 2 weeks in advance. We're going to be cutting. I mean, even Zuckerberg at Facebook will signal that we're going to cut 10% of our staff at the beginning of the fall or whatever.
Right.
But this guy didn't want to tell anybody. He wanted everybody to show up, and somebody would come to the desk of the employee who was affected, take them to HR, explain what was happening, and then have them escorted out of the building. And that would be that. And, the employees who are sitting next to them, they're friends. They've been colleagues for all these years. They'd be watching and what's going on, and this person wouldn't come back. What would that do to morale?
Yeah.
And what would that do to trust? Everybody would be waiting for the other shoe to fall. When's this going to happen to me? Productivity would tank after that. So I made the case that we needed to explain to employees what was coming. And he didn't want to do that. He said, if we do that, it's going to get into the press. And I said, well, this is a Fortune 500 company in a metropolitan area. You think this is going to escape the notice of the press somehow? So we finally convinced him to do a desk drop memo. This is before email, before employees had computers on their desks. So it was printed in the print shop and distributed desk to desk. It was waiting for employees when they came in that morning. So at least everybody knew what was about to come down in the next few minutes. And of course,
better than nothing.
Yeah, but of course, the local newspaper got their hands on it and ran a story. And the president came into my office. He slammed the newspaper down on my desk, and he said, I told you this was going to get into the press. I said, I told you I knew it was going to, but look what it says in the lead. It says what we said in that memo. If we hadn't distributed that, if the press hadn't had that, they would have called somebody who'd been laid off, or they would have called the CEO who retired 3 years ago, or the senior VP who's now running a turquoise shop in a strip mall.
Yeah.
And it's not like they're going to say, oh, we don't have an official announcement here from the president of the company. We won't write about this. Information abhors a vacuum. They're going to go after those secondary and tertiary sources of information and write the story.
Yeah, it's just it's a lack of common sense. It really is. It's a fear of the story getting out. Don't communicate anything that you don't want to see on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. That phrase has done more damage to employee communications, I think, than almost any other phrase. It's going to get out, especially with social media now. Things are going to happen.
You can't control the narrative. I mean, press releases were this fantasy that we were controlling the narrative, as though the reporters weren't going to get their hands on the press release and write whatever they wanted to. But
is it just me, Shel, or has just been a rash of horrible, horrible layoff announcements that were done? What was the one that was done accidentally? Somebody in HR sent it out before she was supposed to. That was just recently in the news. Nike, his message was just awful. I'm seeing just layoffs happen. Layoffs are a part of life. Get out in front of them, communicate them well, and whatever story does come out won't make you look bad. But when you communicate it horribly and people hear about an email that morning and everyone's out the door by noon, it just makes the company look bad.
Transparency is just a given these days. The fact that the leaders of the organization aren't saying something, or they say something that makes employees roll their eyes. What do? They go to Reddit, they go to Glassdoor, they talk to their fellow employees on Slack or Teams. If the job of communication used to be crafting the message, today it's really pressure testing whether the message is going to survive contact with employees' actual day-to-day experiences.
Yeah. I think the old job was crafting messages. The new job is sort of helping leaders survive contact with reality. And I just read one of our clients were doing a sort of a fun thing. Before every major announcement, we try to assign somebody to play Reddit. Like somebody's going to play Reddit. What is an employee's on Reddit right now? Here's the message. What are they going to be talking about out there, or Facebook, or whatever? Pick your social media channel. But somebody should be playing the employee on social media. We spend so much time asking, how should we say this, instead of saying, should we say it at all? Does it need to be said? Who does it need to be said to? We're so worried about crafting the perfect message. You know what? You can't dodge it anymore. You can't dodge reality. People are going to take it. They might misconstrue it. They're still going to talk about it. That's the way of life these days.
Yeah, there are a lot of other things we could talk about when it comes to counseling leadership. One that I want to cover before we wrap up here is the channels that they use to communicate, because there's a number of studies that find that executives gravitate to the channels that they feel comfortable with or they think are efficient for them.
Yeah.
They'll do email blasts or all staff memos or, the really polished and scripted and rehearsed town halls. But employees, especially the frontline employees, they want something more human. Executives tend to default to email, intranet article. They have their internal comms people write for them. And employees want face-to-face. They want those short, unpolished videos that we were talking
absolutely.
about. Anything two-way. I mean, and ask me anything if they prefer text would work really well.
Yeah, you know what? I've always found that leaders choose channels based on convenience, and employees choose channels based on trust.
Yeah,
they, if it's an easy thing it's easy for them to have a leader have the communicator craft an email, have it come from his office, he'll approve it and hit send. It is the old saying, Shel. The biggest danger of communication is the illusion that it happened, right? Yeah. And these leaders need to be told that just because you're the CEO and you hit send on an email because it's convenient for you doesn't mean you've communicated. Don't pick the most convenient channel. Pick the channel that employees will respond to the most.
Pick the one that works. There's a thought.
The trust thing I get.
So, Steve, when you walk into a CEO's office to provide counsel to them for a client, what's the one thing you found they're most resistant to hearing about their own communication style? And how do you get them past that?
That's a great question, Shel. I think the thing they're most resistant to is, unfortunately, adjusting to the fact that times have changed. And this is more true with older leaders, but attention spans have changed. Expectations have changed. Expectations of leadership. If this is not 1960, 1970, where you went to work and you worked 50 years and you got a gold watch and you went home, people want more information. They want more transparency. But the good side of that is that they want less corporate polish. Nobody's ever said, I wish our CEO communicated less often, but with better lighting. I wish he didn't so much. I wish he would use a teleprompter. That's the hardest part, is to get them to understand that authenticity and being human matters more than being scripted and polished. And we had we were working with, I won't say the name of the client because he's still there, but this was a guy that you sat in the room with him and he was fantastic. And then he would do his video and he was like he got paralyzed somehow. So we videotaped him one way with a script and a teleprompter. We videotaped him the other way, just talking with the ums and the ahs and the stutters and the imperfections. And I said, which one would you like better? And he goes, go with yours. Go with that one. And he did. And it was a huge success. So it's hard to get them to understand that they don't have to be perfect. Employees don't want perfect. They want human. And they
shouldn't be perfect.
True. No, they don't. Yeah. Nobody's perfect. Imperfection makes you perfect, I guess is one way to say. I just made that up. That's good. Imperfection is perfection. Makes no sense.
Yeah, so like I say, there's all kinds of other things that we can provide counsel on. We touched on some of them at the beginning. I mean, if they're telling you communicate this, don't just go out and communicate it. Tell them this is not going to land with employees. I don't know why you made this decision, but no one's going to get behind this.
Well, that's what I said in the beginning, is that that's why communicators don't have that seat at the table. It's because they don't speak truth to power enough. They take the CEO and they don't go in there and they don't say, this is not going to land. What we should be is we should be their pipeline into the workforce, and we should be willing to bring harsh truths back to them. Hey, that last town hall, too much PowerPoint, not enough dialogue. People didn't get their questions answered. Hey, that last email that you sent out, wow, you took 3 paragraphs to get to the point. We need to be the pipeline, and we need to be an ongoing focus group for leadership to the workforce so that we can constantly give them good advice. And not enough communicators do that, in my opinion.
I mean, the listening element, it's in the outer ring of the framework model.
I know.
But the point of listening isn't just so you know. You have to do something with that. Mark Schumann used to do this great program when he was at Sabre, the software company that does the ticket reservation system. Schumann's great. He called this the Culture Club. He had hundreds of volunteers around the company, around the world. And once a month, I think it was once a month, he would pull them together in a focus group, usually over Zoom because it was a global company, but occasionally in Texas where it was headquartered, in person. He would pick one element of the culture and talk to them about it. And then he would record about a 3-minute audio file summarizing what he heard and send that to the executive team. So on a regular basis, all they had to do was click play, and in 3 minutes, and sometimes what they heard made them very uncomfortable.
That is a brilliant idea. Of course, Schumann is bright.
Yeah, he definitely is. But that listening and feeding back what you've heard from employees to leaders, so they know how their decisions are going to land.
That is exactly what a communicator should be doing. But you know what? That takes guts, and it takes work, and you just got to do it. Could it be, Shel, as sort of a closing thought, that maybe leadership communication isn't really that complicated? Less performance, more presence, less messaging, more conversation, less talking, more listening, less acting like a CEO and more acting like a human being. I don't think employees want perfect leaders. They want believable leaders. And I think that's where, and that takes some coaching, and that because these people are hardwired to think that they have to be perfect, have all the answers, because otherwise they'll lose confidence and I won't have any credibility. No, you have credibility when you admit you don't have all the answers and when you're a human being about it.
Yeah, and trust employees to act like adults. If you treat people like adults, they tend to act like it. If you treat them like children, they'll act like that.
Yeah, 100%, Shel.
So we would love to hear from you, listeners.
Yes.
Any examples you have of providing counsel to leadership, or your effort to get that seat at the table, whatever you want to share with us. Share with us. Send email to fircomments@gmail.com. Leave a comment to the show notes on the FIR Podcast Network website, or LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever you found out about this podcast. Send us a note. Tell us how counseling executives in your organization has been going, or any great stories that you have to share. We'll share those on the next episode.
Shel, I always feel a little bit smarter after talking to you.
I feel the same way after talking to you, Steve. Look forward to the next one.
All right. Well, I'm off to happy hour. It's 2:36 my time. I'm late.
It's time for wine, huh?
Yeah, right.
Okay. I'll talk to you next time.
All right. Talk to you, Shel.